Now let's look at several horizontal translations at a time. So we're going to sketch the graph of y equals negative 3 cosine of 2 pi x plus 4 pi, and then we need to list those 5 key points. So we're going to look at first the amplitude. The amplitude is going to be just 3. So the lowest will be negative 3, the highest will be 3. We can look at the period. So our period is different. So the period is going to be 2 pi over b. B is over 2 pi, so it's 2 pi. So 2 pi over 2 pi, our period is 1. Then we need to look at how is it shifted. Now it's not 4 pi. So for a phase shift, when we have something like a period change as well, you're going to use negative c over b to be able to find how it's moved. So our c value is here, the b value is in the front. So that is 4 pi, negative 4 pi over 2 pi, and that tells us it is negative 2, so it shifted left 2. That's what it tells us. Then we also know that it's reflected over the x-axis, okay, because of the negative in the front. So let's take a look at the interval of one cycle. So we're going to do the same thing where you set the inside equal to 0 and then you set it equal to 2 pi. So 2 pi x plus 4 pi equals 0. So subtract 4 pi. You get 2 pi x equals negative 4 pi divided by 2 pi. So x equals negative 2. Now let's figure out the right side. So the right side, we're going to do 2 pi x plus 4 pi, and that equals 2 pi. So subtract 4 pi. So 2 pi x equals negative 2 pi divided by 2 pi. So x equals negative 1. So one interval is going to be between, or one period is going to be between negative 2 and negative 1. So I'm going to do one period. So let's start with one period we said was 1. So one period is 1. Half of 1 is a half. Half of a half is 1/4. And this is going to be 3/4 here. Now I know it's going to go backwards because I'm actually going to start at negative 2. So negative 1, negative 2. I'm going to start at negative 2 there. Then I need to label everything. So negative 1/4, negative 1/2, negative 3/4, negative 5/4, negative 6/4, which is negative 3/2, and then negative 7/4. Then the max is going to be 3, and the minimum is going to be negative 3. It's cosine, so it's going to start all the way at the bottom at negative 3 when we're at negative 2. Then it goes up to the 0, here, here, and here. So this is one full period here, and we can double check. We started at negative 2 and we ended at negative 1, which is what I should have ended with. Now the last part is just to label the ordered pairs. So negative 2, we're at negative 3. Then at negative 7/4, we're at 0. Then at negative 3/2, we're at positive 3. Then at negative 5/4, we're at 0. And then at negative 1, we're back at negative 3. So try this out. Sketch the graph of y equals negative 1/2 sine of pi over x plus pi. And then you're going to list the 5 key points as well. All right, if you tried this out, you would have seen that the amplitude is 1, period is, you do 2 pi over pi, which is 2. The phase shift, you do the negative c over b, so that is left 1. And we know it's also reflected over the x-axis, and we're looking at a sine graph. So looking at the interval of one period, one cycle, you do x plus pi equals 0, and pi x plus pi equals 2 pi. To figure out where one interval is. So that's between negative 1 and 1. So what I first do is I did the one period. Period is 2, so I started with that just so I know how to divide it up. So 2, half of 2 is 1, half of 1 is a half, and then this is 3/2. Then I just go backwards because I know I have to go left to negative 1, and then it'll stop at 1. So it's a sine graph, so I start at the midline at 0, then I go down, up, down, and notice that I am between negative 1 and 1. Now that I graphed it, I can identify those points. So these are the points that I want to see. It's from the transformation. So you start from negative 1, 0, negative a half, 0, 0, positive a half, and then at 1, 0. Let's look at one more example, vertical translation. So we're going to sketch the graph of y equals 2 plus 3 cosine 2x. So we notice right away that it shifted up 2. So that is where our midline is going to be. So 2. We know our amplitude is going to be 3. Our period, remember that's 2 pi over b, so 2 pi over 2. Our period is pi. And we're not shifted left or right any. So we know that in one interval, it's going to be from 0 to pi. So I start at labeling it. So pi, pi over 2, pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. The midline starts at 2. We know our amplitude is 3, so we're going to go up 3 from 2, so that's going to be 5, and then down 3 from 2, which is negative 1. We're graphing a cosine, and it's positive, so we start at the maximum here. Then we go down at pi over 4 to the midline, and then all the way down to negative 1 at pi over 2. Then we're at 3 pi over 4, we're at 2, and at pi, we're at 5. Now, if you needed to graph more than one period, then you just go forward and label the rest that you're going to use. So this is 5 pi over 4, 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2, and this is 7 pi over 4, and the last one's 8 pi over 4, which is 2 pi. And this goes down, oops, change color, down, down, up, up, and so this is 2 periods of the graph of the function. So try out this last example. Sketch the graph of y equals 2 cosine x minus 4. Oh, let's list our 5 key points here. I apologize. So the key points on this one is going to be at 0, 5, pi over 4, 2. This is pi over 2, negative 1. 3 pi over 4, we're at 2. And then at pi, we're at 5 at the max. All right, so try out this last example here. Make sure to list the 5 key points. So you try this out, your amplitude's 2, period is 2 pi, and it's shifted down 4, so our midline is at negative 4. And then the interval we are going to sketch between is 0 and 2 pi, that's one full cycle. And then we label the x-axis, label the y-axis with all of those important points, and then here is the graph.